Sri Sachidananda Sadguru Sainath Maharaj Ki Jai. Ramana Maharshi His Life, Chapter 4 in the Arunachaleshwara Temple. When Arunachala drew me up to it, stilling my mind, and I came close, I saw it stand unmoving. Tiruvannamalai means holy mountain. From the Tamil words, Tiru means holy and Annamalai, which is in the Tamil name for Arunachala. In 1901, a few years after Ramana's arrival there, the town had a population of about 17,000. This has since grown to over 110,000. The famous Arunachaleshwara temple at the foot of the hill is 1550 feet long and 750 feet wide and is therefore one of the largest temple complexes in southern India. It dates back to the early Chola dynasty of Aditya I and Parantaka I, 871 to 953 AD. It represents fire, one of the five elements, and is the most of sacred places in southern India. The other four elements are represented by the temples in Kanchipuram, earth, Tiruvanaikaval, water, Kalahasti, air, and Chidambaram, ether. It is dedicated to Arunachaleshwara, god Ishvara, who manifested himself as Shiva's column of fire in the form of hill Arunachala. See chapter 7. The temple complex has three compound walls with 9 gate towers, gopurams, and 3 inner courtyards. The eastern tower, which houses the main entrance, has 11 stories and is 216 feet high and is the second highest temple tower in southern India. Inside the temple compound, there are numerous shrines to the various gods. The impressive thousand-pillared hall with exactly 1,000 richly decorated pillars, numerous open pillared halls, mantapas, gardens, inner courtyards, and 2 temple ponds. The oldest part of the temple, the inner sanctum cella, lies inside the third wall. It is square in shape and is lit only with oil lamps. This room, which only Hindus are allowed to enter, contains the holy lingam of Arunachaleshwara. The third courtyard also contains the sanctum of Mother Goddess Unnamalayamma, shortened to Uma, another name for Shiva's consort Parvati. When after his 3-day journey, Ramana alighted from the train in Tiruvannamalai on 1st September 1896, the holy mountain and the temple lay before him in the morning light. It is worth noting that he identified Arunachala first with the temple and only later with the mountain. Overflowing with joy, he hastened to the temple, whose doors stood open as if to welcome him. He went straight to inner shrine cella and stayed there some time in ecstasy of complete surrender. He then left the inner temple compound and threw the unopened packet of sweets which he had received from the Bhagavatar's wife into the Ayankulam temple tank. A man saw him do this and approached him and asked if he would like to have his tuft of hair removed. Cutting off the tuft of hair which Orthodox Hindus have on the back of their heads as a sign of their caste, and shaving the head are the signs of renunciation. Part of the formal act of starting life as a sannyasin is to lay down the old clothes and take a ceremonial bath. Ramana agreed. One of the barbers who practiced his trade at Ayankulam tank cut off his beautiful black locks and shaved his head. He gave the barber some money and threw the rest of 3.5 rupees away. Then he tore up the dhoti he was wearing and kept only one piece as a loincloth. A loincloth, kaupina, would be his only clothing from now until the end of his life. Ramana remembered an incident in his youth in Madurai concerning the wearing of kaupina. He told how at a festival the wife of his uncle Subba Iyer once asked him to help prepare some sweets. He hesitated and then finally refused outright, as the work would have forced him to remove his clothes and wear only a loincloth, which made him feel embarrassed. The uncle and his wife rebuked him. Ramana remarked jokingly, "If I refuse to wear kaupina once, I am now made to pay the penalty by wearing it always." From this day on, he never touched money again and never had any possessions. Whatever he received as a gift, he immediately distributed to those present. Finally, he removed his Brahmin thread, the sign of his high status. After After he had laid everything aside, he went back to the temple without, however, taking the ritual bath prescribed by the Hindu scriptures after the head has been shaved. There was no need for it. For quite some time there had been no rain, but now the heavens opened so that he arrived back in temple area drenched from head to toe and had received his bath in spite of himself. His first night in Tiruvannamalai he spent freezing in the open pillared hall in front of the temple. On the day of his arrival, he had nothing to eat. Only the following day did he receive his first alms, bhiksha. He reports, the next day I was walking up and down in the 16-pillared mandapam in front of the temple. Then a Muni Swami, a Swami who had taken then a Mauni Swami, a Swami who had taken a vow of silence, came there from the temple. Another Palni Swami, a well built man with long matted hair, who used to do a lot of service by clearing and cleaning the temple precincts with the help of a band of sannyasis, also came to the 16 pillared mandapam from the town. Then the Mauni, looking at me, a stranger here, being in hungry and exhausted condition, made signs to the above Palni Swami that I should be given some food. Thereupon the above Palni Swami went and brought some cold rice in a tin vessel which was all black with a little salt strewn on top of rice. That was the first picture which Arunachaleshwara gave me, taken from Mudaliar Day by Day, page 283. In the thousand pillared hall and in the Patala Lingam, Ramana first settled down in the thousand pillared hall in the temple compound, which is on the right when entering the temple through the eastern tower. That hall with its thousand richly carved stone pillars is a raised stone platform open on all sides. Here there is a constant ebb and flow of pilgrims. Exposed to the gaze of general public in a place of pilgrimage, the strange youth soon rose to the curiosity of the visitors. Street urchins started to pester him. No doubt they felt provoked by the youth, the same age as them, or not much older, sitting motionless like a statue in silent meditation. They used to look for him to throw stones and potsherds at him and make fun of him. Ramana was, however, not their first victim. The ascetic Seshadri Swami, who had also been living in the temple for a number of years and was considered by people to be mad because of his often unusual behavior, had had to endure a similar fate. As a result, Ramana was also called Chinna Seshadri, the young Seshadri. But Seshadri Swami recognized in Ramana a kindred spirit whose exceptional depth of absorption he valued. He named him Brahmana Swami, saint of Brahmins. Seshadri Swami himself had renounced the world at the age of 19. He was now 26. Later, he and Sri Ramana came to be known as the two eyes of Tiruvannamalai, whose glance sanctified the place. The bond between them lasted the whole of their lives. Seshadri tried to protect Ramana against the attacks of urchins, but his endeavors were unsuccessful and sometimes merely served to make matters worse. One day, while Ramana was sitting absorbed in meditation in the thousand pillared hall, he was pelted with stones from behind, which fortunately did not hit him. As a result, he nevertheless decided, in order to escape such troubles in future, to withdraw to a windowless underground vault under the thousand pillared hall known as the Patala Lingam. Patala, snake's cave, underworld, a kind of hell. There was a Shivalingam behind which he sat down, leaning his back against the wall. The cellar was never used or visited and therefore never cleaned. The rays of the sun never penetrated here. It was also damp and overrun with vermin such as woodlice, ants, bees, and wasps. Despite being bitten by mosquitoes, Ramana sat unmoved in yoga posture with legs crossed, impervious to the world. His thighs, where they met the ground, were soon covered with ulcers from which blood and pus oozed. The scars were to remain visible for the rest of his life. Here the children left him in peace, he reported. Children used to run after me when I hid myself in Pataralingam. From the outside world, they would pelt me with stones and potsherds, but none of it reached me as I used to sit in the southeast corner. The urchins never dared to come in because of the extreme darkness that prevailed in pit, the broken steps of which could not ever be seen from the surface. From Bhagavan Sri Ramana, page 29. A pious woman named Ratnammal found him there. She spoke to him and brought him something to eat. She urgently begged him to leave the place and come to stay at her home. But the young Swami made no reply either through words or gestures. She laid a clean piece of cloth beside him and bade him to use it as a bed or to sit on to keep at least some of the vermin away. But he took no notice and did not even touch it. He also made no effort to obtain any food. People therefore used to place food in his mouth, but he was not aware of it. When later he was asked if he had any food during the time of his stay in the vault, he answered, "Food was forthcoming, milk, fruits, but whoever thought of the food?" Sri Ramana neither spoke nor moved. People who saw him like this thought he was practicing an intense kind of spiritual exercise, tapas. Because he was silent, people were of the opinion that he had taken a vow of silence, mauna. But for him, all this was no spiritual exercise at all. It was merely something that happened to him. I have never done any sadhana. I did not even know what sadhana was. Only long afterwards I came to know what sadhana was and how many different kinds of it there were. Only if there was a goal to attain, I should have made sadhana to attain that goal. There was nothing which I wanted to obtain. I am now sitting with my eyes open. I was then sitting with my eyes closed. That was all the difference. I was not doing any sadhana even then. As I was sitting with my eyes closed, people said I was in samadhi. As I was not talking, they said I was in mauna. The fact is, I did nothing. Some higher power took hold of me, and I was entirely in its hands. Mudaliar Day by Day, page 274. There is little or no information about how long Ramana stayed in Samadhi in the Patala Lingam. It was probably several weeks. One Venkatachala Mudali, a visitor to the temple, finally brought him out of there after Seshadri had drawn his attention to the alarming bodily condition of the young Swami. Venkatachala Mudali reports, one day, going near the thousand pillared hall, I found a group of boys, mostly Muslims, hurling stones in the direction of the pit. Enraged at the sight, I seized a twig and ran towards the young scamps and who fled promptly. Suddenly, from the dark recess of the hall, there issued forth the figure of Sheshadri. I was taken back, but soon recovering myself, inquired of Swami if stones pelted by boys had hurt him. "Oh no," replied the Swami, "but go and see the Chinnaswami there," pointed towards the pit and went away. Proceeding inside, I could make out nothing for a while as I was coming from a glare into darkness. In a few minutes, the faint outlines of young face became discernible in that pit. Somewhat frightened, I went out to the adjoining flower garden where a sadhu was working with his disciples, mentioning the facts to them. I took some of them with me. Even then, the young youthful figure sat motionless and with closed eyes. Despite the noise of our footsteps, then we lifted the Swami from the pit, carried him from the hall up a flight of steps, and deposited him in the front of a shrine of Subramanya. The Swami still remained unconscious, his eyes closed. Evidently, he was in deep samadhi, and wondered how anyone could remain deep samadhi. We noted the large number of sores on either side of his thighs and legs, with blood and pus flowing from some of them, and wondered how anyone could remain unconscious of the body amidst such torture, regarding it as irreverence, nay impertinence, to make any further noise in such presence. We bowed and came away. Narasimha Swami, Self Realization, page 48. In different areas of the temple compound. At the shrine of Subramanya, there lived a Mauni yogi and a group of mendicant ascetics who had settled down in the nearby garden. Sri Ramana was cared for occasionally but not regularly. At noon each day, the yogi used to bring him a glass of milk collected from a stone basin after the sacrifice to the statue of goddess Uma. This was no pure milk but a murky mixture of various food offerings: milk, water, sugar mixed with turmeric powder, raw and ripe pieces of plantains, and other sacrificial remains which the priest had poured over the devotional image. Indifferently, Ramana swallowed it all. When the temple priest who performed the service at Uma's shrine noticed that one day, he was dismayed. He thereafter arranged that pure milk without any additions be brought to Ramana as soon as it had been offered to goddess. During this time, any food has still to be put into his mouth, as he would not eat what was merely placed in front of him. Without the care of the others, the Swami would probably not have survived for long. After spending some weeks at this shrine, Ramana moved to the adjoining flower garden. Tall oleander plants grew in this garden, some of them 10 or 12 feet high, and he would sit here in their shade deep in samadhi. At times, he would sit down under one tree only to find himself, when he later opened his eyes, sitting under another tree. He also often did not know whether it was a day or night. When I closed my eyes, deeply absorbed in meditation, I hardly knew whether it was day or night. If at any time I opened my eyes, I used to wonder whether it was night or day. I had no food and no sleep. If there is no movement, you do not need sleep. Very little food is enough to sustain life. That used to be my experience. Somebody or other used to offer me a tumbler full of some liquid diet whenever I opened my eyes. That was all. Nagamma Letters, page 175. Some people who saw the young ascetic sitting motionless like that thought, he is sitting like a jada, dull-witted person. He must be a mad fellow. Ramana later said that he found such remarks amusing and wished that everybody could be overcome by such madness. Finally, Ramana moved to the hall where the vehicles for the temple processions were kept, Vahana Mantapam. Here he was again exposed to the pestering of street urchins, and therefore withdrew into the dark inside the hall under the vehicles. Again he sometimes found himself under a different vehicle from the one he had sat down under. Somehow he had managed to clamber over all the obstacles without being hurt and without being roused from his samadhi. After some time, Ramana left the Vahana Mandapam and sat under the Illupai tree, which was inside the outer wall of the southern temple tower. The path used for temple processions passed nearby. At Kartikeya, in particular, large number of pilgrims would pass by. Here, here, Ramana was fully exposed to the weather. Sometimes a cold wind blew and his body would be covered with dew. To protect himself against the cold, he would cross his arms about the upper part of his naked body. Later, he reflected that no woolen blanket could compare to the arms laid across the chest, and that this was the first upper garment that he used. He even reported that he had been naked at times. It was not because I had a vairagya renunciation that I should have no clothes of any sort. The cord piece I was wearing used to bring on sores where it touched the skin. When the sore became bad, I threw away the cord piece, that is all. There used to be an old Gurukul temple priest who for the first time arranged for some regular food for me, either by supplying some from his house or by sending the Abhisheka milk, sacrificed milk from the temple to me. After I had been nude for about a month, this old Gurukul told me one day, "Boy, the Kartika Deepam is approaching. People from all the 24 districts will be flocking here. Police from all the districts will also be here. They will arrest you and put you into jail if you are nude like this. So you must have a court piece." So saying, he got a new piece of cloth, made 4 people lift me up and tied the cord piece around me. Mudaliar, Day by Day, page 283. At the following Kartikeya festival, Sri Ramana's first disciple, Uddandi Nainar, arrived and he became a permanent companion. He had a bullock cart which he used to transport people and goods from one town to another. Like so many other pilgrims, he too had come to Tiruvannamalai for the Kartikeya festival and saw the young Swami sitting under the Illupai tree, absorbed in deep samadhi. In search of self realization and peace of mind, he recognized in the young Swami the living embodiment of the holy scriptures and said to himself, "Here indeed are realization and peace, and here must I seek them." From then on, he did not leave his side. He took care of his bodily needs and prevented him from being disturbed or bothered. He settled down at a short distance from him, observed the crowds of visitors for hours at a time, and drove away the urchins who found it amusing to cause trouble for the young ascetic. He also cooked simple meals which he shared with him. Uddandi was a learned man. In Sri Ramana's presence, he recited sacred yoga and Vedanta texts such as Yoga Vashishta and Kaivalya Navanita. He longed to hear some words of instruction from his new guru, which would help him on the way to self realization and help him find peace. But the Swami kept silent, and he, in his turn, did not dare to speak to him. Uddandi was unable to remain with Ramana constantly during his lengthier absences. Ramana was again pestered by street urchins or people who were curious to see him. Here, there were no dark places where he could hide. Many thought him simply to be a lazy, good for nothing and played tricks on him. One day, while he was sitting under the Illupai tree in Samadhi, unaware of his body, when no one was near, a boy poured some mud over his back to find out how deep the absorption of the young ascetic was. When Ramala later came back to body conscious, he noticed that his loincloth was wet and sinking, and that someone must have played a prank on him. He did not feel any anger, but the time was approaching where he would leave the temple area and move to a quieter place. Jai Ramana, Jai Sai Master.